Starting a career mode with Enzo Maresca's Chelsea and FC26 promises to be an exciting and rewarding experience. This is a team brimming with potential and upside, guided by an Italian manager whose tactical intelligence has brought a clear identity to the club. Following last season's impressive campaign, the Blues have firmly placed themselves back in the conversation for a top 4 finish, and perhaps even an outside push for the Premier League title. With silverware once again on the radar and several smart additions made over the summer, this is how you can start a realistic Chelsea career mode in FC26. Implementing Enzo Maresca's tactics will be key to recreating a Chelsea career mode that has a realistic experience. His 4-2-3-1 setup focuses on patient build-up play, positional structure, and intelligent rotations, with inverted fullbacks stepping into midfield, the double pivot controlling tempo, and the attacking midfielders operating fluidly between the lines. This system allows Chelsea to dominate possession while maintaining defensive balance. If you're looking to add these tactics to your career mode, check out the realistic Chelsea tactics video already on the channel. And for even more depth, be sure to check out the Patreon exclusive alternate Chelsea tactics video that offers an advanced and in-depth look at Maresca's setup. The Chelsea first team squad has been significantly streamlined under Enzo Maresca, with a clear focus on building a more balanced and cohesive unit. However, there are still a few players who remain out of favour and should be moved on quickly to maintain squad harmony and free up space for new arrivals. On the other hand, there are several core players who are absolutely vital to Chelsea's long-term success, individuals who embody Maresca's footballing philosophy and will form the backbone of the team moving forward. Managing who stays and who goes will be crucial to shaping the future of your Chelsea career mode. So if we take a look at this 45-man unit, 5 of those players are currently goalkeepers, and the first name on the list is Robert Sanchez, who is the #1 choice under Enzo Maresca for the starting position in goal. He is followed on by Gabriel Slonina, who is currently the 3rd choice, and you might want to try and loan him out to try and develop him a bit better and maybe have him come in and be the 2nd choice or maybe even the 1st choice at some point in your career mode. There is also Sharman Lowe, who is out on loan at Bolton, and you might want to try and loan him out again in further seasons, or maybe look to try and sell him on and try and reduce the amount of goalkeepers in the first team squad. The 4th goalkeeper on the list is Philip Jorgensen, who is currently the 2nd choice goalkeeper and is also looking to try and compete with Robert Sanchez for that #1 starting position. However, he hasn't really been able to prove himself because he's also had a few errors in him when he has been given the right to start games, whether it's in the Prem or last season in the Conference League. I thought he was quite good in those games, but as a 2nd choice goalkeeper, I think he's a solid option. Now, the last player on this list is Mike Penders, who is currently out on loan in France for Strasbourg, of course, Bluco's 2nd club or 3rd club. I don't know how many clubs Bluco actually own, but he's at the sister club of Chelsea and he's developing very well there, and a lot of Chelsea fans are very hyped about the potential of Mike Penders. He could be the future #1 in your career mode, just like he might be the future #1 for Chelsea in real life. For the left backs, there's Cucurella, Wiley, Hatto, and Samuel Smith. Now, for the 2 youngsters and Samuel Smith as well as Wiley, they've been obviously loaned out to the Championship to try and grow and develop at Watford and Swansea respectively. Now, if they do grow and they do develop and they do become a lot better, you would imagine that Enzo Maresca would give them an opportunity in his first team squad. He's not opposed to starting or giving youngsters an opportunity. However, if they don't develop the way that Chelsea or Maresca are wanting or requiring, they could definitely be sold on for a profit, and that money being reinvested back into the club. But currently in the first team squad, there's the likes of Jarrell Hatto as well as Marc Cucurella, who has been one of the best left backs in the Premier League over the last 2 or 3 years. At the very least, he's had some incredible form under Enzo Maresca. He's scored some massive goals for them, but most importantly, he's just been a very solid option for the Italian manager to rely on. Now, he's backed up by Jarrell Hatto, who's a new signing who has come into the club this season. He's also quite young, but he's also a very dynamic option. He can be deployed as a centre-back or maybe even as a left-back to eventually back up the likes of a Marc Cucurella down that left-hand side. And I do know that Hatto has a massive potential, so you should try and develop him as best as possible and eventually have him starting over Cucurella in 2, 3, or maybe even 4 seasons time down the line in your career mode. So for the centre-backs, there's Adarabioyo, Disasi, Chalobah, Badiashile, Fofana, Colwill, Hughes, Sarr, and Anselmino. I think that's how you pronounce his name. Now, what I would like to say is for these 2 youngsters, and Anselmino, who's been loaned out to Borussia Dortmund, and Sarr, who's been loaned out to Strasbourg, again, the sister club of Chelsea, they are 2 youngsters that might have a long-term future in this team. They've been scouted from their respective leagues. Chelsea have been very attentive to their developments, and I do think both of these players could definitely be bench options or maybe even starters depending on how they develop. As for Hughes, I'm not exactly sure what the future might hold for him. He could just be a player who gets sold on for a decent amount of money at some point, and that money then gets reinvested into the first team. As for Colwill, although he is out currently injured and will most likely miss the entirety of the season with an ACL injury, he is going to be a key figure to how Chelsea play out from the back in that middle centre-back role, looking to dictate the pace of play and really help the team set up their structure correctly. And you could see that when he went down injured, Maresca was looking to bring in another player that could effectively try and replace or replicate what Colwill did for the team, but they didn't do that. And now Maresca is forced to try and use Tosin Adarabioyo in that position, or the likes of Chalobah cover if needed, and it hasn't really worked out that well. Another player that Chelsea did spend a lot of money on, who hasn't blown the doors off and he's had a lot of injury issues himself, has been Wesley Fofana. So he's another player that I don't see leaving anytime soon, but he also needs to improve relatively quickly if he's not going to be eventually replaced in this first team. And I do think that he has another season or two to maybe try and prove himself in his pure quality, especially the quality that he showed at Leicester. And then I think if he still hasn't done that, you might want to try and bring in somebody else. Now, as for the likes of Badiashile, Chalobah, and Disasi, I think that their time is limited. Now, some people might be thinking, why would you include Chalobah in that? Well, the reality is that Chelsea did try and sell Chalobah like quite literally a year ago, and that didn't work out. They then loaned him out, and then they had a lot of injuries in the back line, and then they brought Trevor Chalobah back. Now, Trevor Chalobah in that time has been very good, if not fantastic, during his time at Chelsea, the third or fourth stint that he's had at Chelsea. I mean, he's been loaned out, brought back, almost sold, not sold. But I do think that if a good offer does come in for Trevor Chalobah, you might see the board look to try and pull the trigger and execute a deal for him. Now, the likes of Disasi we know is in the bomb squad and won't really feature at all this season unless he finds a move to another club. And you could probably put Badiashile in that equation as well. Another player who is still a part of Maresca's first team, but again, if a decent offer comes in and if a decent replacement can be found, you might see a player like Badiashile also exiting the club. Now, as for Tosin Adarabioyo, I think that Maresca does like him, although he is very limited, doesn't have the pace to really man that backline correctly, especially as that middle centre back, but he has done a good job when called upon. He's a reliable figure, and again, he's an experienced player that Chelsea definitely do lack in their current first team model and squad build. So for those reasons alone, I don't see him going anywhere anytime soon. To round off the defense is the right back area, and there's currently a Champong, James, and Gusto. Now, I did mention this the other day in my Discord, but Gusto is a player that doesn't really fit the way that Enzo Maresca requires his right backs to truly play. That inverted role, looking to play in the central spaces a little bit more, but can also flourish in the wider zones. Now, effectively at Lyon, Gusto was a bombing on fullback up and down the flank, looking to have the touchline as a support structure, but when he's in the midfield areas for Chelsea, especially under Enzo Maresca, it hasn't looked as good. And that is why I said that a Champong as well as James, going forward at least, should definitely be the two mainstay right backs, because I think James obviously has the quality to play in midfield. We've seen that under Enzo Maresca. And in that right back area that either stays back or inverts or plays wide, he's brilliant. The same can also be said for a Champong. In the Conference League last year, he was great, and I also know that he can play as a centre-back, so having him play as that right-sided centre-back in the back three, very similar to Jarrell Hatto in his role, I think he could flourish very well and effectively be the backup and the natural replacements for Enzo Maresca to back up the likes of Reece James. However, in saying that, I don't think replacing Gusto or selling Gusto anytime soon is part of the key agenda for the upcoming transfer windows. I think he's maybe got another season or another 2 seasons in him before Maresca really does turn his attention to trying to replace the right back. And in that time, by the way, I do think that a player like Joshua Champong will have developed correctly and will be of age to kind of get a lot more game time and effectively, again, replace Gusto in the starting 11 or on the bench as that mainstay backup option for right back. Onto the midfield, and there's Caicedo, Isugo, and Romeo Lavia, the 3 defensive midfielders in the team. There are a few more, especially if we talk about the other number 6/8 position in the side, but for the time being, Caicedo, we all know he is a world-class number 6. He's been incredible during his time at Chelsea. The first 6 months weren't the greatest, but since then he's kicked on and he's definitely up there when it comes to who's the best number 6 in the league. Is it Rodri? Is it Rice? Is it Caicedo? A lot of people might edge it just towards Caicedo at this moment in time. Some people are saying he's the best midfielder in the league. I wouldn't go that far, but in terms of being the best number 6, I think he's pretty much up there. So you can't really look to replace Caicedo. However, the backups off the bench, Isugo, could be very good. I haven't seen a lot of him. I've seen like little glimpses here and there when he was playing for Sporting and then eventually in Spain. I can't remember exactly what team he was playing for, but I haven't seen a lot of him, so I don't know if he's going to be good enough. But he has been brought in as a young potential player that can grow and develop and maybe be the natural replacement for Caicedo if you need to rest and rotate him, especially if you are looking to push into the latter stages of the Champions League. You're going to have Premier League games, maybe FA Cup games along the way, so he's going to be very important. Currently out injured, so that's not great. But there's also Romeo Lavia, another player who has also struggled with injuries of late. Hasn't been able to string together at least 4 games for Chelsea in a row. So the injury issues for Lavia are very, very key. Now, one thing I would say is, if we've seen how Maresca likes to play his team, it's always about partnerships and structures and certain players fitting into certain structures for certain games and other players doing the same for other games. Now, Lavia and Caicedo can definitely function together. In fact, in my personal opinion, I think the base of Chelsea's midfield should be Romeo Lavia as as well as Moises Caicedo. They provide perfect balance. They have a great way of complementing one another. Lavia is such a technically advanced, high IQ sort of player. I mean, to be fair, so is Caicedo. But again, they just fit each other a lot better than the standard Caicedo and Enzo Fernandez sort of midfield. But if Lavia can stay fit, if Lavia can, string together 10, 11, 12 games in a row of just being fit and available, very similar to what Reece James has been able to do of late, I think that this would more or less be the midfield. I mean, for Enzo Maresca's first game in charge of Chelsea in the Premier League, that was Chelsea versus Man City. The starting duo at the base of midfield was Romeo Lavia and Caicedo, if I'm not mistaken. And then Lavia got injured, and then he missed a whole lot of games. So trying to get his fitness up, trying to keep him fit and available and ready, and I think that you might have two key fundamental pieces to potentially a Champions League winning side, or maybe even a Premier League winning side, with Lavia and Caicedo being the heartbeats of the team in those two number 6/number 8 positions. Onto the left midfield position, and there's currently Tariq George, Jamie Gittins, and there's also Alejandro Garnacho, who's currently in FC26, being played as an attacking midfielder, and I'm sure eventually that will change, but for your career mode, if you start it now, you should try and change him to a left midfielder so he can be deployed out wide on that left, or maybe even the right hand side. But there's Gittins and Tariq George. Now, this is a player who was almost sold in the summer to Fulham. The deal then collapsed on deadline day, and that meant that George then stayed at Chelsea, and to be fair, he has been able to produce and come up big with a few clutch moments so far this season, so maybe he can try and rewrite the narrative and maybe nail down a long-term future for himself at the club. But we do know that the Chelsea board, they don't mind selling young players from their youth academy to try and balance the books and try and fight off the PSR curse that they are currently facing. So George might be a bit of a casualty in that aspect, especially if he does do well. They could then just up the price for him and then sell him on for sure. So I would probably say within the next 6 months to a year, we might be seeing George playing in another team's kits. As for Jamie Gittins, he was a relatively big signing this summer for around 50 to 55 million pounds, which is a lot of money, and he hasn't really been able to show a lot of his skill or talent just yet in blue, but he has shown glimpses of what he might be able to produce, and especially in the game against Liverpool, he was able to be a bit more consistent with what he was able to do, stretch the pitch, use his pace, use his technical flair at times to try and beat a man or draw in the opposition and open up space for somebody else, and that did help quite a bit, especially for that winner for Esteval. I mean, Gittins opened up the wide space, it allowed Cucurella to, have a bit more time and space on the ball, slide the ball into him, and he was able to cut it back, and Esteval was able to score the goal. So Gittins, I think, needs a bit more time to truly adapt to the Premier League before we do see a better and more consistent version of him. For the central midfield position, there's Fernandes as well as Santos. Now, both of these players have been deployed in various roles or positions under Maresca during his time at Chelsea. Quite literally, Santos played in the number 10 role the other day versus Forest, and Fernandes, depending on the positioning of Cole Palmer and the game plan of Maresca, he's been deployed in the number 10 role himself. But what I would suggest you do is, because they more so do play in that other number 6 role next to a Caicedo or Romeo Lavia, converting both of these players into CDMs. Now, I know for Fernandes that's probably going to take a long time, but it just makes a lot of sense in order to try and fit them accordingly into the 4-2-3-1 that Maresca strictly plays. Now, both of these players do complement the other number 6s quite well. Fernandes and Caicedo, they do a very good job in complementing one another with the passing range of Fernandes, the bites of Caicedo, the late box crashing of Fernandes, and the ability to strike the ball from range for both Caicedo as well as Fernandes. And I mean, with Santos and Romeo Lavia, it also makes a lot of sense to try and pair those two up. However, I still stand by what I said earlier, where Lavia and Caicedo probably offer the best balance. But yes, that's just what I would do for these two players. Convert them into CDMs, or if you want, attacking midfielders, and then have them flourish in the deeper or the more attacking spaces on the pitch. And then we get onto the number 10 position, and the mainstay number 10 in the team is the likes of Cole Palmer, who has done incredibly well during his time at Chelsea, whether it's out wide on the right or in the number 10 role. And for Maresca, more so, he's featured in that central area on the pitch. Now, he is the superstar of the team alongside Caicedo. He is the player who creates opportunities for others, but also puts them away himself. He's the talisman of the side. So he's not going to be going anywhere anytime soon. He's got a massive contract with Chelsea, and you should probably look to continue to build around him, adding superstar talents like an Esteval or potentially another Caicedo sort of player around him, or maybe look to improve the defense and help shore out the back line. That would be great too. But he's currently out injured, so there are other players who might look to come in and replace him and rotate with him and make sure that that injury isn't a long-term frailty of the overall squad building. Now, Garnacho is an effective cam in FC26, but that is not the case. IRL settings, he is more of a winger. We've seen at Man United when he was supposed to be deployed in that number 10 role, he didn't do as well as what he should have. He is a natural wide player looking to get into the space, run in behind, operate along the touchline and create opportunities from those wide sections. So converting him into a left or a right midfielder is the best and only way to really get the best out of Garnacho for the game. A few other number 10s who are out on loan are Paez, Kellyman, and Casteldine. I think that's how you pronounce his name. Now, this is a player I'm not too sure about whatsoever. If you're a Chelsea fan, let me know down below. What is the report on him? Is he a player that has a long-term future, or is he a player that will most likely be sold to Huddersfield at some point, and that money will then be put back into the club at another point? Kellyman is a player who was done in a bit of a weird deal, you could say, to try and beat the PSR allegations, and that was a deal done with Aston Villa, if I'm not mistaken, and he's now been loaned out to League One club Cardiff. However, Kendry Paez is a young talent from South America that a lot of people are very hyped about. He's been loaned out to Strasbourg to develop for that season, or for this season I should say, and he does have a big future. He could be the natural replacement for Cole Palmer in the future, depending on how he develops. If he doesn't develop well, I'm not exactly sure how much money Chelsea spends on him, but he will then be sold for a profit at some point, and that money again will then be reinvested into another young potential superstar talent. Now, speaking of superstar talents, Esteval Willian is a player who can play in the right or the left hand channel, or maybe even down the middle. Now, I'm pretty sure he did say in an interview before he joined Chelsea that he does prefer to play as a number 10. So he could also be a great backup / rotational player to replace Cole Palmer with if he's needed to rest or be rotated, or if he's injured. But it would also kind of block the development of Esteval Willian because he wouldn't get as much game time, and therefore that would cause a few issues. So having him as a right midfielder makes a lot of sense. He can be the effective backup and the long-term replacement for a player like Pedro Neto. But for Esteval, I think he is a great player to continue to try and build around. Have him, Caicedo, and potentially Cole Palmer be the three cornerstones of the team. Maybe looking for a Levi Colwill to step up a bit more, and he can be a fourth cornerstone of the team. That could be great. But so far, he's shown great glimpses of what the future looks like. He scored some big goals. His goal versus West Ham was by far his most impressive. He set up a goal versus West Ham. He dribbled through like the entire team and then squirted across the box. And I'm not sure if it was João Pedro or somebody like that. They just tucked it in. And I'm pretty sure he also scored versus West Ham. But of course, he also scored a massive goal versus Liverpool. Stoppage time winner, winning the game for his team. He's only 18 years old. And the development and the handling that Maresca has done with him so far is superb. He hasn't thrown him in to start every single game. He's slowly managed to ramp up the minutes and rely on him in key moments. And you can see that he is a player who's taking those key moments with both hands, great opportunities, and he's running with it. And he's doing a very, very good job so far. And then there's Pedro Neto, who for the time being is the starting right midfielder, but he's also been able to be deployed and do quite well down the left-hand side. In the big games like the Club World Cup final versus PSG, he was played down the left-hand side and he was tracking back and he was helping Cucurella track and marshal the likes of Doué or Kvaratskhelia, or maybe even the likes of Dembele whenever he shifted over. So he is a great player with a massive work rate, and so far during his time at Chelsea, he's done incredibly well at being a pacey transition outlet, looking to hug the touchline, open up space in the central zones, but also break in behind, have that ball over the top into him being an option or an outlet for the central players or the deeper lying players to then ping the ball into him. And might I say, his crossing ability has been brilliant, whether it's from the left or the right, being able to cut the ball back and then whip it into the far post. He's been able to rack up a few assists. But I would say that Pedro Neto long term probably isn't the answer for that right midfield position. There might be the likes of Esteval Willian, or maybe another who is set to join Chelsea, which we will talk about soon enough, who is set to join Chelsea in the upcoming transfer window. As for Facundo Buonanotte, he is a player who's just been loaned to Chelsea for this season. It's a straight loan, no real option to buy. However, I do think that if he does impress and he does improve under Enzo Maresca, you might find Chelsea trying to negotiate a permanent deal with the likes of Brighton for Facundo Buonanotte. And lastly, out of the wingers is Raheem Sterling, who has no future under Maresca and probably no future under any Chelsea manager because he has fallen out with the board. He has been training, but the board are looking to try and shift his contract off of their books because they don't want to pay him as much money as what they had initially agreed to. So trying to sell Sterling to any club really, especially if you can try and find a London club that will more or less go along and try and balance out the realism of what Sterling's looking for, that might be the best option for both Chelsea, the career mode, and of course Raheem Sterling. And then onto the last position, which is the striker role, and there are currently 7 strikers on the first team box. The first being João Pedro, followed on by Delap, then there's Nicholas Jackson, who has been loaned out to Bayern, Fofana, Morgan, Stutter, and then Mark Guiu. Now, this is a player who was loaned out and then brought back due to the loaning out of Nicholas Jackson, and he has done quite well, and I must say I was very impressed with him in the game versus Nottingham Forest. When he came onto the pitch, there was more of a focal point up front, and you saw the entire team flourish, knowing that they had a player who can hold up the ball and more or less establish a platform higher up the pitch. Now, to be fair, I think he should have scored a goal. There were a few opportunities where he did have, but he did snatch at those opportunities where he tried to rush certain things, but eventually it will come for him, especially if he does have consistent game time, because the likes of Liam Delap is going to be out for a further few weeks. I don't know exactly when he comes back, maybe it's December, but he's obviously out with a hamstring injury, and he can't continually play João Pedro week in, week out, game after game, because there's also the Champions League football, there's also the Carabao Cup, and eventually there will be other games to rotate with. So having Delap out does put a lot of strain on João Pedro, but I will say he has done incredibly well since joining Chelsea. The Club World Cup, he came in after being on vacation and immediately started scoring goals and was vital in them eventually lifting the Club World Cup. To start off the season, he did quite well. He scored a few goals, but he hasn't really been able to recreate that scoring form that we saw in the first 2 or 3 games. But his link-up play, his ability to drop into midfield combined with a player like a Cole Palmer or an Enzo Fernandez, get other players involved, feed other players in better, more opportune positions, it's been elite. It's been fantastic, and he's a player who will continue to grow with the side. And I think maybe when a player like a Liam Delap comes back, you might see both a Delap and a João Pedro starting every now and then, having that dual striker tandem working up front, because he is also a player who can function and flourish in the number 10 role. So that's another player who can rotate with and combine with a Cole Palmer and again rotate with him. As for Nicholas Jackson, Fofana, Morgan and Stutter, I would probably look to sell all of them. I think Jackson definitely does not have a future, especially with how he's fallen out with the Chelsea hierarchy. The same can be said for Datro Fofana, who hasn't really done as well as what the Chelsea board would have wanted when they initially signed him. And as for Morgan and Stutter, I don't know too much about them. I do know, however, that Morgan does have a real face, which is quite cool. So if you are looking for a young player to sign in career mode, he has a good young English striker to potentially go ahead and sign. However, in terms of the realism aspects, I don't know too much about Stutter or Morgan. So if you are a Chelsea fan and you know more than me, because you definitely will, let me know down below in the comments section. Youth scouting is a massive part of Chelsea's long-term success, and continuing that legacy in your career mode is essential. The club already boasts one of the best and most extensive scouting networks in world football, constantly identifying elite young talent to add to their carbon pipeline. Setting up scouts in England and South America is a must. These regions have produced stars like Colwill and James from England and Esteval from Brazil. For your third scout, you have more flexibility. You could expand even further into South America and uncover the next Argentine talent, or even explore Africa, where many top European clubs are now finding exciting prospects ready to break through. First team scouting will play a crucial role in shaping Chelsea's immediate and long-term success, especially with the board's clear focus on signing young talents who can develop into world-class players. The key countries to target are England, Spain, Germany, the US, Argentina, and the Netherlands, all of which are rich in emerging prospects that fit Chelsea's recruitment model. Your first scouting instruction should focus on finding young players aged 16 to 25 with the potential to become world-class. These players can either contribute immediately or grow into key starters over time. The second focus should be identifying a first-team quality goalkeeper, as replacing Sanchez could be vital to helping Maresca's side reach the next level. Lastly, the centre-back position needs attention, particularly if some of the current players are moved on. Securing a reliable, high-quality defender to strengthen the back line will be one of the main priorities of the club's scouting departments. When it comes to transfer targets, there are several players who have been heavily linked with a move to Chelsea in real life and would immediately make an impact on your career mode. These are players capable of fitting seamlessly into Maresca's tactical system, while also elevating the overall quality of the team. They bring the right balance of youth, energy and technical ability, which are traits that perfectly align with Chelsea's vision under Maresca. Signing a few of these players early on will not only strengthen the first team, but also provide the depth and competition needed to sustain success across all competitions. So kicking things off with, we have got a number 1, a goalkeeper, France's goalkeeper, and that is Mike Mignon from AC Milan, a player who almost moved to Chelsea in the summer, but both clubs could not agree on a deal. I think Chelsea were willing to pay 10 to 15 million for him, and AC Milan wanted 20 to 25 million for him, but then Chelsea were like, his contract is set to expire and we're not paying over the odds for Mike Mignon, which I think would have been a great bit of business, because overall wise, you improve the quality in that position. And to be fair, that position in the Chelsea squad, and I'm not even being biased here, the goalkeeping position in the Chelsea squad currently is very weak. Robert Sanchez being your number one in 2025 is outrageous. But there could still be movement for a player like this, and maybe on a free deal that could work out. So Mike Mignon coming into Chelsea might not be as far-fetched as what some may have said after the deal initially fell through. Now, I have said in countless segments of this video that the centre-back area of the team is somewhat weak, and it is an area that both Maresca and the board are going to try and target and improve. Now, Joel Ordonez, who has been quite good for Club Rouge, both in the Champions League as well as in his respective league in Belgium, and he has been very good. He's also 21, so he does match the age profile that Chelsea do look for when they try and make signings, and he does have a high upside. He also has a lot of key elements that a lot of the Chelsea current centre-backs don't have. He's very physical in the air, which we all know that Chelsea are very weak in the air, especially in that backline area, so he would be able to provide a bit more defensive bite, especially when defending against corners, which has been a key weakness, at least this season, for Chelsea. And then there's Mark Guehi, who has been confirmed that he will be leaving Crystal Palace on a free come at the end of the season, and this has been confirmed from both Oliver Glasner, Crystal Palace's first team coach, as well as Steve Parish, the chairman of Crystal Palace. So he is a player that Chelsea might want to try and scoop up on a free, because currently they do have a few financial issues with their balancing of the first team books and all that stuff that comes with the whole PSR shebang and debacle that they are currently facing themselves with, or the current situation that they're facing, or the current situation that they're in, something like that, along those lines. But imagine they sign Mike Mignon on a free, along with a player like a Mark Guehi, two players who have the experience that the back line and deeper areas on the pitch have sorely missed over the last couple of seasons. That would be brilliant business if you ask me. And Mark Guehi is what, 25? So he's not even that old, soon to be 26. So if they can try and get this deal over the line, it would go a long way into, one, weakening Liverpool, and two, improving Chelsea's backline, especially if a player like a Trevor Chalobah or a Disasi or a Badiashile are sold on, because that money could be quite key into trying to reinvest it into another position in the first team. On to the next player, and I do know that in the DM positions, Chelsea are quite stacked. They've got Isugo, they've got Caicedo, they've got Lavia, they've got Fernandes, they've got Andre Santos. They've got quite a lot of players. But this is a young player in Mokio from Ajax who has a massive upside. If you're a career mode fan, you will definitely know about this kid already. But nonetheless, they have been linked loosely with him. And I do think that because he is a young superstar potential talent, that won't stop Chelsea. They'll look to try and execute a deal with the potential likes of Ajax, and then maybe loan him back to Ajax for a further year or two, just so he can try and develop and grow into a better player. And then they might look to bring him back into the first team for Chelsea and have him play there, or again, maybe sell him on for a massive amount of money. If Usugo doesn't work out in those 2 years, he could be the natural backup for Usugo. If a player like Romeo Lavia still has a lot of injuries and he needs to be sold on, he could be the Romeo Lavia backup. It makes a lot of sense to try and bring in a player like this, especially with the overall model that the Chelsea board do have with recruiting young talents like this. Now, I have put down Morgan Rogers as well as Enciso for the number 10 roles. I've said Esteval Willian can play there, João Pedro can play there. Of course, there's Cole Palmer. There's also kind of Garnacho, but I've already said he's more of a winger. But there are players in the current Chelsea first team that can be deployed in that number 10 position. Now, Morgan Rogers was heavily linked. People were saying, if we don't get Xavi Simons, we're going to go and get Morgan Rogers. And when I say we, I mean Chelsea, because I'm taking from a Chelsea fan perspective. But I do think that Morgan Rogers would cost a lot of money. Now, I see that a deal like this may be being executed if Chelsea sell on a player for a lot of money. That could be a kind of like a Conor Gallagher sort of sale again, which allows you to execute a few other deals because you've got that massive PSR financial boost. But Morgan Rogers would obviously be a great player for Chelsea to look to try and incorporate him into their first team. He's an already made established Premier League figure, and he could come in and play in the number 10 or on the right or maybe even on the left of that midfield, and he would be a great player to combine with and try and link up play and drive past players. He just possesses so much that Chelsea would love to have as a key element to their first team. But if they don't get him, there's also Julio Enciso. Now, Enciso is a player who was bought by Blueco, not even bought by Strasbourg. He was bought by Blueco and then put in Strasbourg. But I do see that Enciso might be a key player that does make the switch from Strasbourg in France to England and Chelsea. I think he was originally supposed to be bought by Chelsea and then loaned, but again, due to the financial implications that Chelsea find themselves, they couldn't execute that deal, and therefore it fell through, and then a few days later it was then approved, and then Blueco said he's going to Strasbourg. So this is definitely a player that I do see playing for Chelsea at some points in the next 2 or 3 years. Now, if you've been living under a rock for the last 2 years, you might be wondering, why is Quenda as well as Amiga set to join Chelsea already? And that is because they are set to join Chelsea in 2026. I think Quenda is going to be joining in this upcoming January window, or it could be in the summer window. I'm not exactly too sure about that, but he will definitely be joining Chelsea. He was bought this year January, and then loaned back to Sporting CP to continue his development and carry on playing. And that's why I said during the little Pedro Neto segments, he might not be the long-term right midfielder. It could be a fight between Esteval and Quenda, two elite talents who are massive potentials, but that's a good thing for Chelsea to have. That is a fantastic thing for Chelsea to have. As long as they develop them accordingly and correctly, I don't see this going wrong. You could play Quenda as a left midfielder, you could play him as a right midfielder. It works out nonetheless. Esteval can be deployed down the left or the right or in the number 10 role, and that works out very well. It does lead me to believe that I'm correct in saying that Nicholas Jackson will be leaving, that Datra Fofana will be leaving, and the other two, Morgan and Stutter, they'll also be leaving. Because you don't guarantee Amiga coming in and then have 7 first team strikers. It just doesn't make sense to me. So the likes of Guiu, I would be a bit worried if I was him, because Amiga is definitely going to start over him. He also has a different sort of profile compared to Guiu and João Pedro. Very similar profile to the likes of Delap, however. So you might see a bit of a 3-man strike tandem, or maybe the likes of João Pedro does move over to that number 10 role more permanently under Enzo Maresca. That could also be an option going forward. But these are definitely 2 players confirmed that will be joining the club in 2026. I'm not sure if it's 2026 January or 2026 June, but nonetheless, 2 confirmed signings already coming through the door. And there we go, people. That is how you can start a realistic Chelsea career mode in FC26. I do hope you have enjoyed this video, and if you don't mind smashing that like button down below, as well as subscribing to the channel if you are new and you like the content on it. We are trying to hit 30k by the end of this year. It is by the day looking less and less likely. However, we are immediately trying to hit 25k. So if you're not subscribed just yet, please do subscribe to the channel. It would mean the absolute most. This is my baby, and I'm trying to grow it to as big as possible. Now, if you haven't seen the Chelsea realistic tactics video, be sure to check it out. And if you are a Patreon subscriber and you have access to it, be sure to check out the alternate Chelsea tactics. It helps extend and add more depth to the career mode as a whole. It does make things a little bit more interesting, and again, it does add a lot more to the overall career mode and how you approach certain things. So there is that too. Anyways, until the next time, until the next one, I hope you have a smashing goddamn day. I've also realized I forgot to shout out the Discord. We chat everything IRL football there. We chat banter, FC, FM, we do the whole lot there. So there is that too. But anyways, until the next time, until the next one, I hope you have a smashing goddamn day. I'm out of here. Peace.